What's up, comic book fans? And welcome to Comics Icons. Now, JJ, what they call me. And today, we got more Hellverine. This time with issue number 3. And if you missed any parts of this series, then I'll put up a card at the top of the screen and a link at the end of the video as well to the playlist. But when we left off with this series, we saw how Wolverine's son Daken had got resurrected by the demon Bagra Ghul, who had sensed a similar vessel like the original one he had previously inhabited in Wolverine. But in addition to that, after the attack on the Pentagon by the Hellfire destroyers in issue number 1, the lone survivor that was with those same soldiers when they were killed in action saw his former squad mates right as he was in the middle of crashing out. And last but not least, we found out that even though these soldiers had been unalived, their memories were still partially intact, as one of the soldiers went back to visit his family, but would end up meeting the claws of Wolverine instead. So if you guys are ready to find out the Hellverine's next moves, and if Wolverine will be able to get his son back while taking down these Hellfire destroyers, then you guys know what time it is. Let's get it. So this issue kicks off with a little bit of backstory for General Harms, before his face had gotten all jacked up, back when his ugliness was only on the inside. He was commander of a shadow unit that waged wars that took place outside of the media's attention. And the kind of things that they did were unimaginable. He was said in some circles to put the red in red, white, and blue. And it was one mission where he had learned that the families of the enemy were held up in an ancient church, and they had hung up a white flag to surrender. But Harms' sadistic ass just tore down that flag, and then he tore up those family members. He could care less that they were helpless, or that he had just slaughtered innocents in this sacred holy place. But in the church was a holy relic up on the altar. It was the skull of a demon slain by a saint. And as he went up to the altar to take the relic, one of the family members thought to be dead pulls a weapon and puts a hole right through the eye of General Harms, right before the rest of the soldiers put her down. But the bloodshed in this holy place awakened something ancient and foul, and it whispered in Harms' ear as he lay in the pool of his own blood. It told him that as long as he would continue to carry out sacrifices in Hell's name, then he would live. He would be loyal to Hell first and the US government second. So of course he accepted and experienced a resurrection of sorts. And then we pick back up with Wolverine outside of DC, where we had left off with the last issue at the home of one of the destroyers. And as the home burns down, the wife grabs Logan by the wrist to take him into the garage before it too burns down. And in the garage, she gifts Logan with her dead husband's motorcycle. And then we transition over to General Harms' office in the Pentangle. You see, for what he did back at that church, he was actually supposed to face a war tribunal, but the Secretary of State gave him a second chance. Project Hellfire needed a new director, and if he could revive the program and get her some fast results, then he'd get to keep his standing within the government and keep his pension as well. But if he couldn't get his destroyers in line, then he was finished. So he figured he'd solve this problem by fighting Hellfire with Hellfire. But then he gets a call from one of his scientists down in the lab, and his presence is requested immediately. And back in the lab, that survivor from last issue that had seen the destroyers on TV and recognized his old teammates, Lieutenant Townsend, he decided to show up at the Project Hellfire lab and use his firearm as his access. "I saw what you did on the news. I saw what you did to my crew," he tells the scientist while holding her at gunpoint. "They were dead. I watched them die. I watched them buried." But then, in that moment, General Harms enters and tries to settle down the lieutenant. But Townsend lets the general know that he found them by calling in a few favors. But the next call he might make is to reporters. "Or you can help me," he says to Harms. He wants to walk again, and he requests the transformation for himself just like his teammates. Harms, though, admits that this technology is yet to be tested on a living subject. But Townsend is desperate and he doesn't care. He needs this, he tells Harms. Plus, he knows his team better than anybody, and he knows that they'd follow him through the gates of hell. He can lead them and get them in line because they need a commanding officer to guide them and give them a purpose. And for Harms, this is just the type of Hail Mary that he needs to get things back in line, so he welcomes Townsend to Project Hellfire. Meanwhile, Akihito had come from darkness and now consumed by light, the blazing light of hell itself. But with every passing hour, he was becoming more aware of his rebirth and what he'd become. But when he gripped the handlebars of his bike, he had no control over their direction. At least not yet, but maybe never. He felt like he was wandering through a big black house trying to find his way out. Akihito was driven to live, but the Hellverine was driven only to punish. And the destroyers were out there, so the Hellverine would find them. But until they made their next move, Hellverine wouldn't be able to sense them, so he found a high vantage point where he could wait, at the top of the Washington Monument, where he could tune in to the frequency of evil, like an antenna. Then we switch back over to General Harms as he once again discreetly meets with the Secretary of State. And here she questions Harms about the latest incident at one of the destroyers' homes. But she tells him that they did manage to silence the media for now, but she just came from the White House and notifies Harms that the president does want Project Hellfire to work out. But if they don't manage this situation by morning, he will be accepting the secretary's resignation, and Harms would likely disappear into a shallow grave or the bowels of a federal prison. So Harms uses the moment to let her know about his new developments, that the team's former squad leader has joined them, and he just needs a little bit more time. But then this secret meeting is interrupted as the destroyers crash the party and go right into attack mode. So the general fires off a few rounds to buy some time while he and the secretary jump into his car to pull off. But the destroyers are fierce and unrelenting, and they manage to hold back the car from taking off, while the chick with the metal mouth breaks through the passenger side window and takes a huge chunk out of the secretary's face, ending her time on this earth. And then as Harms tries to run free, he's wrapped up by chains. But all that violence gave off just the right frequency, which the Hellverine was attuned to. And he then shows back up and breaks those chains that bound the general, allowing him to run free while the Hellverine takes on the destroyers. And the destroyers were no match for the Hellverine, as he takes old Bite down and rips apart her metal mouth and then officially puts her down, leaving only one more destroyer. Meanwhile, though, among all of the weapons that Dr. Spivey had made for Harms was a rifle loaded with holy water ammo. And he had never tested it to know if it would work, but the last destroyer was on the move, and the Hellfire was about to give chase. So Harms had to act fast, and he fired on the Hellverine, and once hit, the high-pitched scream that the Hellverine unleashed made dogs bark and children cry in their sleep up to 50 miles away. But someone else heard it too. Someone that had been sniffing the air, tracking the smell of sulfur. The Wolverine, who had arrived just in time to see before him the son that he had lost and now seemingly was in danger of losing again. And as Akihito finally hits the ground and Logan runs over to his boy to check on him, he's relieved to see that he's still alive. But at Logan's touch, something sparked inside of his son. And it was the demon Bagragul. It had sensed its original host and source of power and wanted to plug back in, which Logan allowed. It was like a father wishing he could swallow the fever of his child, wanting to make their pain his own. But instead of helping his son, Logan actually just doomed him, as the only thing that was keeping Dakin alive was the fuel of the demon Bagragul, who was now gone from Dakin's body, leaving Dakin once again lifeless. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the issue. Wow, y'all, that was intense. But what did you guys think about the issue? Do you guys think that we'll get Dakin proper back? Do you even want Dakin back as he was, or do you want him back as the Hellverine? But how sick was it to see how the Secretary of State went down? Yikes. I definitely can't wait to see how this miniseries comes to an end with only one more issue left. But you guys know I want to hear all your thoughts and theories down in the comments. And as always, if you guys enjoyed this video and this channel, and you'd like to support the channel, then you can do so by stopping by the Comics Icon store and picking you up some Comics Icons merchandise, including the background music heard right here in this video available for download. Or by joining the Iconic Fan Club channel membership, and there'll be a link in the description to join. But with your membership, your voice will be heard during our interactive live streams with yours truly, where we could talk about everything that's been going down in these issues, as well as ones that you'd like for me to go over in the future and other comic news. Plus, you guys will get loyalty badges, member shout-outs in these videos, and up to 20% off of Comics Icons merchandise from the Comics Icons store. Plus, we've got tiers to the memberships as well, beginning at just 99 cents. Or you guys can donate to the channel with a super thanks. And if you're not able to do any of that, then you can still help this channel's future tremendously by dropping a like, share, and subscribing to Comics Icons for more icons in the comic book world. But ladies and gentlemen, it's about that time. I'm out. Peace.